Welcome back to JKLIVE here at Citizen Television. On the bench today, an exclusive one-on-one with U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, the billionaire, former CEO of several Fortune 500 companies, who's now U.S. Ambassador to Kenya. How does a billionaire, former CEO end up as an ambassador to Kenya, Balozi? How does that happen?
Well, I got involved in politics because you might remember I ran for governor of California.
Correct.
I lost. And but got involved in politics and ended up supporting Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden, which was a thing because I was a Republican who jumped ship to the Democrats. And then Joe Biden, after he won, he called me and he said, Meg, I'd like you to be an ambassador. And before I could say anything, he said, and I want you to go to Kenya. And I'm like, Kenya? But he had a great pitch. He said, listen, Kenya is the tech capital of East Africa. It should be the tech capital of the continent. I have a deep technology background. And he said, I think that's important, and America needs to pay more attention to Africa. And I think by sending someone with a business background like you, that will send a signal to the continent that Africa really matters to the United States.
And you have come here with a lot of passion. A lot of us notice. What is it? I mean, what is it?
Yeah.
You seem to really have a soft spot for this part of the world.
You know, I didn't know much about Africa, and I'd been to Kenya on business, and I'd been here once or twice on safari, but I'd never lived here. In fact, we'd never lived outside the United States. And I have just come to admire Kenya so much. The people are lovely and smart and entrepreneurial. And there's so much potential in this country. And Silicon Savannah is real here. And I've become captivated by what Africa will mean to the world. I mean, as you know, 1 out of every 4 people on Earth will live on the African continent in 2050. 1 out of 3 working age people will live on the continent. And so that means it'll be the biggest consumer market and the biggest labor market in the world. Yeah. So I kind of became captivated, and it's a beautiful country. I mean, you know, there's nothing like the Masai Mara. There just isn't.
8th wonder of the world.
Exactly.
I hope you're spreading the word out there.
I am.
So let's go to the President William Ruto's upcoming visit to Atlanta first and then Washington, D.C. And it's a state visit.
Yes.
What does that entail? What does that mean?
So a state visit is the highest honor, if you will, of a visiting head of state. You know, some heads of state just come and visit and have some meetings. This is a state visit. And in the Biden administration, there's only been 5. This will be the 6th one. And it is the first African head of state to have a state visit since 2008. So, and only the 2nd Kenyan to have a state visit. So it's a big deal. It's a high honor for the president, for Kenya, and for the Kenyan people. And, you know, of all the countries in Africa, Kenya was chosen to come to this state visit.
Yeah, there was talk about President Ruto addressing a joint session of Congress, and it went on for a couple of days, and then in the end we heard Speaker Johnson said that it's not going to happen because, you know, there's a lot happening in
And there is a lot happening. Sure. You probably followed our Congress. But he will have, I think, 3 quite good congressional engagements. He'll have a lunch with members of Congress. He'll have a leadership meeting with members of Congress. And he'll also meet with the Congressional Black Caucus, which is a very important constituent for things like AGOA and other things. So he'll have a good afternoon of congressional engagement.
Yeah, and you're going to be there.
Yes, I will be there.
You know, basically, it's like you're holding his hand to go to Washington, D.C. And he's been to the U.S. before.
Yes, he has.
You took him to Silicon Valley back a few months ago. And then before that, he was at the UN, I think at the UNGA. So he's been there before. Why do you need to be there?
Well, I have helped to organize this. There's really 3 groups that are organizing this. There is the United States government, led by the NSC and the State Department. Then there is the Kenyan government, the MFA here. And then Mission Nairobi is a bit of the coordinator between the 2. And so I've had a hand in setting the agenda and making sure all the logistics work. So it's just good for me. I'm not holding his hand by any means. I'm just making sure that this all works the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah. In the last administration of President Uhuru Kenyatta, there was talk that Kenya was leaning a lot to the east. There was a lot of talk about that, and that the U.S. had taken, well, Kenya had, you know, kind of taken a back seat to the U.S. Now it looks like the pendulum may be swinging. Is that the intention?
You know, I think the intention about Africa for America is to give Africans choice. You know, sometimes in life, half the battle is showing up. And I'm not sure America showed up as much as we should have, over the last 20 years. But under the Biden administration, Africa has become a lot more important. The African Leaders Summit, this state visit. And so our objective is, how can we make competitive offerings, not forcing people to choose between, one superpower versus another, but how can we make good offers around health, people-to-people ties, economic trade and development, the digital economy, and be more competitive. I mean, we all live in a competitive world, and we have to compete.
Yeah, just like to remind our viewers right now, if you have any questions or comments for U.S. Ambassador Meg Whitman, please send them through at Jeff at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is JKLIVE. The bilateral relations between the U.S. and Kenya.
Yes.
Are they stronger than ever?
It's hard for me to say because I'm relatively new here, but it feels very strong to me. We have 60 years of partnership. In fact, part of the state visit will be a celebration of 60 years of partnership on everything from regional peace and security to health. Think about what we have done collectively on HIV/AIDS. It's one of the great success stories on trade and investment. So 60 years, it's strong. Every relationship goes through its ups and downs, but this is a very strong relationship based on trust.
I remember PEPFAR did a huge deal. It
was amazing. I mean, former President George Bush, I think, deserves a lot of credit. And then the implementation is everything, and a combination of Kenyans and Americans. I mean, it's a remarkable success story. Yeah.
Let's talk about democracy, transparency, and accountability. And, obviously, corruption is a big thing here. There's not a day that passes that there's not a story about corruption. I'm sure you've seen them.
Yes.
The latest one being the fake fertilizer scandal. And it seems like no significant arrests have been made. Is that concerning for the U.S., for you all?
Well, I think corruption is a big problem facing Kenya. And in fact, if Kenya fails to fulfill its full potential of the natural resources and people and everything this country has going for it, it will be because of corruption. And so I have spent time talking about corruption. You've probably heard me on a number of different speeches. And I think the Kenyan people have to decide they want to change this. America can provide some resources and some technical help, but ultimately this is up to the Kenyans. And I think, the Kenyans need to decide to hold people accountable. And, democracy is based on the rule of law. And fortunately, Kenya has a strong rule of law, and I think Kenya needs to go after it.
Yeah. Before I go into the next topic, let's go back to the President's state visit to the Washington, D.C. What kind of goodies are we expecting?
Well, you'll have to wait to see next week. But we're going to be announcing some trade and investment deals, some regional peace and security deals. But this is very much a partnership. Kenya is now, the U.S. is Kenya's largest export market. Maybe Uganda. Last year it was U.S. I think Uganda may be heading a little bit ahead of us. But this is an enormous trading relationship for Kenya. So it's a real partnership, and we work together on lots of different things. But there'll be, as always on state visits, there's big announcements. So there will be some of those.
Renewal of AGOA, will that be a consideration as well?
It will be a consideration, and AGOA is very important, not only to Kenya. AGOA is, of course, Pan-Africa. It's the African Growth and Opportunities Act, and Kenya has taken very good advantage of it. The exports under AGOA has grown dramatically in the last 10 years, the largest being apparel. And the reason AGOA is so important, I think, is many companies now are looking to diversify their supply chain. If we learned anything from the Ukraine being invaded by Russia, we learned that a single source of supply for any company is very dangerous. And so lots of companies are looking to diversify their supply chain. And what better place to go than Kenya because of 93% renewable energy. So you automatically help your Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions goal. So, and AGOA, for exporting under AGOA, is duty-free into the United States. So it makes Kenya very competitive.
Absolutely. We saw you earlier on with the president at the function where he talked about expect more taxes. I mean, we've tightened our belts enough. That's what Kenyans are saying. How much more? We were on the last hole on the belt.
Well, listen, taxes are an issue in every country. And what we hear from American companies is Kenya doesn't need to be the lowest tax, but consistency, keeping the taxes the same for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Because businesses make investments with a return horizon. You don't expect that you're going to make your money back in a year, but 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So that tax consistency, I think, is equally important. And there's two ways to increase taxes. taxes, I think he said from 16 to 22%,
yeah.
is also to expand the tax basis, meaning the number of people. And that's why jobs are so important. Good paying jobs with a steady paycheck with some benefits, where more and more people have a steady income where they can pay some taxes. And so you expand the number of people, not just going after the same people.
Is that why it's going to be important for younger people to get jobs, especially in technology,
exactly,
and digital and all that?
And manufacturing. In manufacturing, when I first came, I thought there was maybe a chance that Kenya could go from agricultural to digital. But I think manufacturing is such an essential part of every economy because the number of employees per dollar of revenue of a tech company is relatively small to the number of employees per dollar of revenue of a manufacturing facility. And so it's the manufacturing facilities that, whether it's apparel or consumer electronics or whatever it happens to be, that can employ lots of people in quite good jobs.
Yeah. You know, U.S. ambassadors of the past were known to be pro-opposition, for lack of a better phrase. You have taken a different angle. In fact, people out there call you Kenya's ambassador to the U.S. I don't know if you've heard that.
Oh, yes. And actually quite proud of that because I think the narrative on Africa broadly in the United States is 20 years old. Many Americans do not understand the importance and the potential of this continent, and they don't know about Kenya. And so part of my thinking when I got here is, boy, when I was the CEO of HP and eBay, I thought about Africa 1% of the time. If I knew what I knew now, I would be really thinking about what my long-term African and Kenyan strategy is. And so I think changing that narrative is really important. So I think that's what I've tried to do with that presentation, Why Africa, Why Kenya, is to explain to Americans why they should be thinking about investing in Africa and why Kenya should be their destination. So in some ways, I am the chief marketing officer.
You are. You are. Speaking of which, we have a video here that it was I think Why Africa, Why Kenya?
Yes.
Let's take a listen. Robert, could you play that video? Do you mind?
No. Oh, I thought you were asking me.
So, how do I feel about Africa and Kenya and our business relationship?
It's pretty good.
It's good. It's good. We have a little tradition. This is at the American Chamber of Commerce Summit. And the first one was when we debuted Why Africa, Why Kenya. And there was a little song at that point as well, which was Something's Happening Here by Buffalo Springfield.
That's a good song.
And so then we had to figure out what we were going to do for next year. And so we thought, I feel good.
And you do genuinely feel good about Kenya, about Africa.
I really do.
Why do you think it's taken so long to convince Americans?
Yeah, I think partly because there's so many markets that are closer to home. So Mexico, Latin America is closer to the United States. Europe is much closer than Africa. And so by definition, you go to the places that are nearer. And of course, as you well know, the American economy is the biggest economy in the world. So if you're running a company in America and all else fails, get a 1% increase in your sales in America and it dwarfs almost everything else. So I think there's not a negative narrative on Africa. It's just a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding of the opportunity.
You think that's changing?
I do think it's starting to change. I mean, this will take time. Narratives, stories change over time. But I think we're making progress. The preeminence of Silicon Savannah, everyone understands that now in Silicon Valley. In Silicon Beach, do you know what Silicon Beach is?
No.
That's Miami.
Oh, right.
Silicon Beach. And New York is Silicon Alley.
Nice.
So people are really understanding the power of Silicon Savannah and the entrepreneurial qualities here. And I also think people are really understanding the demographic trend that really works in Africa's favor.
And the fact that the digital divide has slowly been, it's almost a level playing field.
It is. It is. Technology is a great leveler, right? I mean, today you can be in do business process outsourcing and be in a call center here, and because of the internet connectivity around the globe, you can service American customers. That's how India really started their major transformation, was with BPO and call centers, and I think it's a big opportunity for Kenya.
Yeah. Party politics in Kenya. There's some who say that you took sides in 2022.
Not true. not true. I mean, first of all, I had just gotten here, so I arrived on August 1st and actually didn't really understand much about what was going on. And but the Americans really do take pride in the fact that we don't take sides in elections. But when President Ruto was the duly elected president, and I actually, many people, including myself, feel like this was a fair and transparent election. I've gotten some criticism for saying that, as you recall. But then he's the president, and we want to work with him and to work on health, when I got here, the drought. I mean, this is the best example of climate change I've seen, from drought to massive floods in the span of 2 years. I mean, it's really quite remarkable. Yeah. So lots of things to work on together.
And the fact that some people say that there's hardly an opposition here right now. Is that concerning?
Well, I think opposition parties are very important balances to existing parties. I mean, I think, listen, in the United States, the Republicans, balance the Democrats and vice versa. So I think an opposition party is important. I think freedom of the press is very important. The fourth estate, you have a huge role to play in a democracy. And so I think, the parties change. Opposition parties look strong and then they look weak. I think, this will sort itself out, in my view. Yeah.
The fact that another thing that's very concerning to many Kenyans is the fact that there is no IEBC right now as we speak.
Yes. Yes.
It's
worrisome.
Yeah.
It is worrisome because they're supposed to be doing the boundaries right now, or maybe even it was supposed to be done by now.
Correct.
So I think this government needs to implement the IEBC and get the right people on that very important body.
Some people who say that you're the president's chief advisor, one of. Is that true?
Oh. I don't think so.
Do you speak a lot?
I speak to him quite often.
So he picks up your phone every time?
Well, yes, but I don't call him. I call him when I really have something to say, and we work on something together. For example, he went down to Ati River a week and a half ago to open 9 new apparel manufacturers, and that will create 20,000 jobs over the next 2 years for young people. And these are good jobs. They have a medical clinic, daycare, 3 meals a day. And I talked to a number of women. It's about 70% women who work in these factories. And they support their families. They pay school fees from that very consistent, reasonably paying job. And so we took him down there. So those are the kinds of things that we do together. We talk about regional peace and security because America is a big partner of Kenya's fighting, Al-Shabaab, and we do counterterrorism together. So when I have something to talk to him about, I do. And I think, just like in your industry, if you add value, people want to hear from more. Hear from more of you. Yeah. If you don't add value, then they don't really want to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The war against Al-Shabaab.
Yes.
Are we winning it?
Well, it's a constant battle. Yeah. I think, the president of Somalia is doing a good job pushing back, but when you push back against terrorist organizations, they push back too.
They do.
So I think Kenya plus America and also ATMOS has really held the line on Al-Shabaab. More work to do. But I feel like we're making progress.
Yeah. Speaking of security, Kenya sending police officers to Haiti.
Yes.
I mean, what is that about? Haiti is what? Is 90 miles from the U.S. border?
Yes. Something like that. Yeah.
Why us? Why should we lead that peacekeeping?
Yeah. Well, the international community asked Haiti to do it. And as you recall, it was ratified by a UN resolution in September of last year. So this was really an international community ask of Kenya. And Kenya graciously agreed. And I watched President Ruto's speech to the nation on this, and he said something that I thought was quite compelling. He said, these are our African brothers and sisters, just in a different place. And they really need our help for peace and security and hope for a better life. So I think that's why he did it. And he's being joined by Burundis, I believe, by many Latin American countries, Caribbean countries. Yeah. And so let's see what happens. I think it's a noble goal.
Yeah, but we don't speak patois or French.
But a lot of the other folks that are coming, other police that are coming do. And so I think that French will not be the major problem there.
Is Haiti governable?
It's a challenging country, right? They've had challenges for many, many, many years. But I do think this is an important country. It's actually a fairly populous country, and I do think it's important for the world to join together to help countries that are struggling.
Yeah. You've been doing a lot of traveling here in Kenya.
I have been doing a lot of traveling in Kenya.
And recently, in the flood-ridden zones.
Yes, yes, yes. And it is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking. And, I was in a district where, the houses were right next to the river, and the river rose above the roofline of those houses and just took away all the houses. And I talked to a woman, and there were many people who have lost everything. Everything that was in the house is gone. And so we're supporting the Kenyan Red Cross, who are setting up temporary encampments to find people a place to stay and food to eat. And it's a very serious situation. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I hope the United States will be able to do more.
I remember covering Hurricane Katrina in
Yes.
New Orleans in 2005. I mean, at least there's infrastructure.
There is.
Here, there's none.
I know. It's just heartbreaking. And, and the people who had the least lost the most.
Yeah. Are you hopeful? Are you? I mean, this is your first African posting.
Yes, it is. It's my first posting.
First posting period.
First posting period.
You might not be here in 6 months or 7 months.
Yeah, we have an election coming up in November.
Correct.
And, we don't know. It looks like it's a very close election. So we'll see what happens. And it's up to the president to, I'm what's called a political appointee. I'm not a career foreign service officer. So the president appoints people like me. And so it will be up to the new president, if there is one, or Biden to reappoint us as political appointees. And we'll see what happens.
You serve at the pleasure of the president.
We serve at 100% of the pleasure of the president because we have no career in the Foreign Service.
So if President Trump comes back, then you have to go back, or how does that work?
No, he looks through all the political appointees and decides who he'd like to keep and who he would ask to come home.
And if President Biden comes back, then you might want to stay on?
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as you fix that embassy on Muthaiga Road. It's been empty for a long time.
Yeah, well, that's the ambassador's residence. It's not the embassy,
it's the
residence. Yeah, but I think we're getting near. It had to have a remodel, and it's taken most of the time that I've been here. But we're getting close to potentially
You're going to get to move into that? You think? Oh.
Well, we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it, but yes.
Ambassador, we got a lot of reactions from folks. Let me go to the magic wall and read a couple of reactions, okay?
Okay.
Tweets are coming in very thick and very fast. Okay.
Do you want me to stand up?
No. You stay right there. Rebecca Gishuku says, the 1998 bomb blast victims cry for compensation up to today, 25 years down the line. Why can't America compensate once and for all? People suffered and others continue passing on. This is justice denied.
Yeah. So I think this has been an issue for 25 years, and I think there's legal reasons and other reasons that the Americans are not able to do this. We're looking at it again. I think every ambassador and every new administration looks at it, but I think it's probably not likely to happen.
All right. More tweets thick and fast. Where are we? Here we are. Okay. Miss Nyabuto says, what is she doing about the backlog in the spousal visas, which date back to October 2022? It's honestly quite unfair to wait that long to be reunited with your family.
Yeah. I actually agree with that. But let me give you a little history of what happened to the consular office. Visas are issued by what's called a consular office. And when I came, the consular office had been decimated by COVID because the consular office is supported by visa fees. And of course, during COVID, there were no visas being applied for and there were no fees. So all the consular officers disappeared into other parts of the United States government. When COVID was over, it was hard to get them back. Do you remember how hard it was to get airline pilots and baggage handlers and flight attendants?
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. You have to get all these people back or hire new people. And when I got here, the wait for an interview for a non-immigrant visa was 2 years.
Whoa.
So now it's down to about 2 months, and we have processed more non-immigrant visas this year than ever in the history of the consular office, and also for immigrant visas. This person is talking about immigrant visas that reunite families.
Correct.
We still have a backlog, but to date this year, we have processed more immigrant visas than we have at any point in the history of the consular office. Doesn't mean we're done. I really feel strongly that they've got a very good point. We're doing the best we can, but it's a resource question, and we're hiring more people.
Gotcha. Okay. Irene Musyoka says, priority visas, IRO IR1 and CR1 are not prioritized anymore. The waiting time is a disheartening 18 months after being documentary qualified. What's the fate of these similarities?
Yeah. Again, it turns out, I did not know this, there's 8 different kinds of visas to go to the United States, and these are 2 that she is referring to. And it's a little bit different than what we talked about before. This is a lower wait line, but this needs to come down. So as we hire more people, we get more automation in the visa department. We can continue to chip away at this wait. And our objective is not to have people be waiting 3 years or 18 months. It's not acceptable, and we will get better, but it's a challenge. It is a challenge. Sure. And the other challenge we have is every time we move the non-immigrant visas wait down to a month or 2, okay, what happens? Everyone in Kenya figures out you can go to America, so the demand goes back through the roof.
Yes.
And then you have to bring it back down, and then it goes up again. So it's a manage. And I have to say, our consular department is amazing. Really hardworking people who try to do the right thing by Kenyans and the right thing by America.
Cool. Okay. Maria Marubu says, hello, Jeff. Kindly ask the ambassador what's happening because people are complaining of denial of visa, and I am victim to
of the pink paper. Yeah. So we do deny people. And are we always right? No. But are we mostly right? Yes. And think about it. Everyone wants to come to America.
No doubt.
And some bad people want to come to America. I suspect this person is not that. But terrorists, money launderers, people who have overstayed their visa before, people who've let their green card expire and then come back. And we have to be quite careful because there are people who wish America harm. It is a minority of people. But what I always say is you have to be thoughtful. You will remember the 9/11 hijackers. How would you like to be the visa officer who let in the 9/11 hijackers? You would live with that for the rest of your life. Yeah. So we really try to be fair, but we also are trying to make sure the right people who are not ill intent get to America.
Sure. Hazard Novan says, what does Meg Whitman think of China's technological and political influence in Africa and how the U.S. intends to keep herself relevant in enabling FDI into Africa and African markets reach their full potential?
Yeah. So, as I said to you earlier, I think America is really showing up more in Africa than we did maybe the last 5 years, but before that, we weren't here as much as we should have been, in my view. And now, particularly in the Biden administration, Africa is very important. And so things like why Africa, why Kenya? By the way, this has spread to other countries. Why Africa, why Cote d'Ivoire? Why Africa, why Tanzania? And telling the story of the opportunities. Each country has different opportunities for investment. And FDI, foreign direct investment, is a very important part of the economic growth of Kenya. You might have seen there was an article in Bloomberg, which is one of the leading business publications in America, that said Kenya may be the next Singapore of Africa. And if Kenya is going to be the Singapore of Africa, it's got to grow at 6 to 8% GDP growth rate, year after year after year for 10 years, and it's got to create 1 million new good-paying jobs every year.
Wow.
So it's a tall order. And part of that will be Kenyan companies, Kenyan innovation, but part will be foreign direct investment from the United States, from Europe, and other places too. We just want to be a competitive player here and offer Kenyans a choice about who they do business with.
Yeah, don't tell that to Rwandans. They think they're the next Singapore.
I know, but Kenya is.
Oh, okay. Davy Kianda says, how did the taxation measures of President Ronald Reagan stimulate the economy? Ask her how they manage taxation changes for stability. Do they demonstrate? What can Kenyans learn from the U.S. in terms of taxation and democracy?
Yeah, I think there's some lessons to be learned, and then there's also some things to avoid, because every tax system has its pluses and minuses. Yeah. So I think generally speaking, the tax system in America has quite a bit of stability. When you're making an investment in America, you know that the corporate tax rate is going to look the same for probably 4 or 5 years at least. Depreciation will be handled the same way, and you have a sense of stability. It's not the lowest tax rates in the world, but it is a stable, and you can count on that. Now, there are, over time, changes that happen. And I think, as Kenya thinks about their tax regime, one of the challenges with the United States now is it's a very complicated tax system. You know, just for an average American to fill out their tax form, this is a very difficult thing. And so I think simpler is better. They say in lots of industries, you know, keep it simple. And I think, you know, as Kenya thinks about its future tax system, how to keep this simple, understandable, and manageable by average Kenyans.
Yeah. I think they say keep it simple, stupid, but that's a...
Yes.
Samonia says, excellent, good work being done by the Anti-Terrorist Assistant Program. The programs are very beneficial to our police officers, and it's imprinting a lifetime of experience. We thank them for coming on board. Hongera. Ambassador, is the U.S. or the West concerned about what's happening in West Africa? Because a whole new wave of change out there.
Yes. You know, there's a lot of now military coups, and you look across the middle of Africa, and it's sort of one after another. And I think, you know, being a democracies are messy. Democracies are hard. I still believe it is the best form of government. And do you remember Churchill said, actually, democracy is very difficult and it's the worst form of government, except for all the others. And so I think, you know, obviously I'm an American. We feel strongly about democracy and what it can bring to the people of the country. But it's challenging. And that's why I think foreign direct investment, if I could say one thing, it's jobs, jobs, jobs. Good paying jobs with benefits that help really create a middle income country.
Yeah. Okay, finally, Ambassador, I think we overstayed our time. You've been very gracious, and Steve is looking at me very badly over there. Your message to Kenyans right now. There's a lot of people who have lost a lot of hope.
Yeah.
But you come here with so much hope, and you're outside looking in.
Yes.
What do you tell folks out there who look up to the U.S., who listen to you when you talk? What do you tell them?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is we're coming out of a very difficult period. Okay, COVID was devastating to every country, but particularly Kenya. You know, first of all, 10% of your economy is tourism. Tourism almost went to nothing in COVID. Then, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that drove inflation. Of fuel, food, not only in Kenya, but in America too. What did we do? We raised interest rates to control inflation. When we raise interest rates in America, we get a head cold. The rest of the world gets the flu because there's risk premiums put on top of risk premiums. And so it's been a difficult environment. Now you think about Savannah. It's a reflection of Silicon Valley, and it's been hard to raise money for second, third, fourth round, what they call B, C, D raises. So if it's hard in America, it's going to be hard here too. But I feel like the world economy is getting better. You saw today through in America, inflation is decreasing now. You really see a big change. Fuel is lower here. Food prices. So I think the world economy, and it's so interconnected now. It used to be, maybe America would do its thing and no one else would be affected. This whole thing is completely interconnected, if only because of technology. And so, but I feel like the world economy is getting better. And that will augur for good news for Kenya. And then I do think Kenya really is standing out as the place to go in Africa.
Ambassador Meg Whitman, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All the very best.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your trip to the U.S.
Thank you.
And we'll see you when you get back.
Yes. You're not going.
But they didn't invite me. I couldn't get a visa.
No, that is not true. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Ambassador Meg Whitman. Wow, what a